Or is this recorded?
This is currently recorded. So,
Okay.
thank you to Mitch Milani of the Bottom Line View for joining this video. Obviously, Mitch is up there in the YouTube world, and I'm somewhere around here. But today, we're going to be talking about Tom Brady. Obviously, he retired this week. The greatest quarterback of all time, the greatest NFL player. I think that's pretty consensus that he's the greatest NFL player of all time.
I hope so. I hope so.
Yeah.
Especially after me going through all these stats, Ultra. It's getting a little ridiculous how many stats this guy has that I
Yeah,
can't even
so
believe
I'm
exist.
sure you guys have all seen the Bottom Line View. You're all subscribed, but if you're not, by some ungodly chance, I'll be linking Mitch's channel, Mitch's social medias in the description. So make sure to go check him out and follow him on there. He's got a huge Tom Brady video coming very soon. So
Mm-hmm.
make sure to stay tuned for that because it's going to be probably the hardest he's ever worked on a video.
Yep.
So, Mitch, before I get into what I want to talk about, just does anything really like were you surprised he retired or
Somewhat. I was somewhat surprised just because I feel like when you're playing at that level that he
right?
was playing at, where I don't know. We haven't heard who's going to be MVP yet. Aaron Rodgers got the All Pro nod, so you would assume it would be him. But now that Brady's retired, there's been rumblings of it could be Brady. But regardless, I mean, you could argue he was the MVP in the NFL this year. And whenever you can argue that about a player, it's kind of weird to see them retire. And we talked about the NFC next year being a little bit weaker, where the
Right.
chance of Brady going back to the Super Bowl is a real possibility. So the crazy thing about Brady is you could now, with his legacy, now that he's retired, you could say, hey, this guy retired at the top of his game or near the top of his game. He could have played till he was 50. And that's the thing that we'll never really be able to discuss and be like,
But I think that makes his retire that makes like it even sound more impressive, right? Because you
that's
look
what I
at
mean. That's what I
yeah,
mean.
like so I look at some of the other quarterbacks that have retired recently. Peyton, I love Peyton Manning, but he was done by 2015. I
Mm-hmm.
know he won the Super Bowl, and I think even you as a Patriots fan felt a little bit of happiness at the end of that game, but he was done. He couldn't throw the ball 10 plus yards. Drew Brees, better than Peyton, but still couldn't throw the ball downfield. He was done.
Mm-hmm.
Philip Rivers, he was pretty much done. Ben Roethlisberger, he was done. Right? Even like, and I love Matt Ryan, but Matt Ryan, like, there's some throws that we see him, and it's like, yeah, he's still pretty good, but like he probably could have made that throw 2 years ago that he just missed.
Yep.
Um, Meanwhile, Tom Brady at 44, was it? He's leading the league in touchdowns, so, right? So it's insane the level that Tom
Big time
Brady has.
throws.
Yeah, he's the consistency that Tom Brady played at this year is just I don't know if we'll ever see it again really with just like the age and still the production. And like when you watch him, it's not like his production's coming through 4 yard passes like Breeze's
Mm-hmm.
was. It's coming through like he's throwing the ball downfield. It's just
Yeah.
he's making the throws. So yeah.
Yeah. He
All
led
right.
the
So I
NFL this year in big time throws from PFF, and he led the league in deep passing. So,
yep.
yeah, it's crazy to think about, but that was the case with Tom Brady.
Yeah. So I've compiled a list of the 5 things that I'll remember most about Tom Brady. Of course, say in 20 years when my son asks me, Dad, what do you remember most about Tom Brady? I'll have this ready for
I'll
him.
just hand him a 2 hour video on YouTube from 10.
Yeah, or I could do that. These are mostly just like their moments and things about him. Like, there's not going to be a week 3 game from 2017 against Houston on here because
I remember
even if he played well in that
that.
game, yeah. But that's not what you're going to remember about Tom Brady. You're going to
Yeah.
remember you're not. I don't even think you'll necessarily remember the statistics first, and he has great statistics, but you'll remember the moments and just what made him great.
Yeah.
So the first thing, and this is not necessarily in order, just kind of a list here. So the first thing I think is his leadership, and I think I think that was on full display last season with Tampa Bay. I'm going to take you back to where we were 2 years ago now. The world felt like it was ending, right? With everything with COVID and that kind of stuff. Couldn't go outside. Tom Brady was a free agent. He left New England and he went to Tampa Bay,
Mhm.
which that by itself was a huge move, right? Because he was going to a completely new team. He went from a franchise that he won 6 Super Bowls with to what had been statistically like one of the was it the worst win percentage for any franchise in sports.
Yes. Yeah, the worst team in
So
sports history.
yeah,
Yeah.
and really hadn't been any good at all since that 2002 Super Bowl. And just for him to be able, he was working out with Godwin and Evans like during COVID, right? He would
Mhm.
always show up to practice, and he had to learn a new system. He had to be on a new team, and he's still like. And the regular season, it wasn't all like I know they won the Super Bowl, but at one point they were sitting here 7-5, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people were doubting them. Now, funnily enough, both of us still stuck with them the whole way from preseason to last week of the year as the Super Bowl
Which,
champions.
by the way, picking them to win the Super Bowl in the preseason, I think there was maybe two major pundits out there that picked them. I know Peter King did because he went to their training camp. I'm not even sure I can name another one. Maybe Skip Bayless because that's his gimmick. But other
Now,
than
Skip picked
that,
the
I mean,
Ravens, I remember.
okay. So, like, not many people even thought the Bucks would be in the conversation for the Super Bowl. So for them to be able to do that in the first year, and you're getting to it, like it's
Yeah,
an insane achievement what he was able to do to go from a place, a dynasty, two dynasties with Bill Belichick.
yeah,
Just leave that support staff, go to Tampa Bay, go to a place with no culture, no winning experience, yes, talent, but very raw, and then be able to kind of craft that, mold that, bring winning culture, winning experience, and just like the belief. That's the thing for me is like there's a lot of quarterbacks out there that are very talented, but they don't give their team that belief in those
right.
moments. And we saw that early in the year, even in games versus like the Chargers, where they were losing by a ton, they came back. And all the players would just be like, it's because of Tom Brady. It's because of Tom Brady. All you have to do is look up the videos and the interviews. It's like,
The
yeah,
Atlanta
it's because
game,
we
second
have
half.
Tom Brady. It's like, that's why we believed, because we've got the GOAT. And that's the thing that kind of molded that team together. And then they found their rhythm and they found their stride, and they were basically unstoppable in the playoffs. They were by
Yeah,
far the
so
best team.
they were so the Super Bowl odds entering last season, it was Chiefs first, Ravens second. The Bucks were, to be fair, tied for third with the Saints and the Niners, but I think that was more just like
Because
hype
they have
and
Tom
like
Brady.
because they have Brady.
Yeah.
When I like people weren't really picking them to get to the Super Bowl
Yeah.
and to
Yeah.
win the Super Bowl. It was just a select few people, and they were 7-5. But you look at the playoff run. I always go back to, and everybody forgets this because Washington was a bad team. But the Washington game, they needed all of Brady's like stats, right? They needed he carried them in that game. Of course, you look in the Saints game, just one quarterback just kind of disintegrated before our very eyes. The other one still was able to make enough throws to win. You look in the Packers game, right? The Bucks were an underdog in that game. I know everybody says they had the better team, but they were the underdog. They were on the road against the MVP, and they
Yeah.
kind of dominated the first half. Were able to hold on. Brady didn't have his best game, but he did enough to win, and he made the throws
Yeah,
to
that
win.
game is funny to me because I kind of obviously as a Brady fan, I wish he didn't throw those interceptions, but I feel like those interceptions kind of mask how good he was in the game because he made so many high leverage plays that were
Yeah,
so crucial to them winning the game. The first drive of the game, I think they had 3 or 4 third downs, and he
converted all of
converted
them.
every single one, and they're all
Yep.
third and longs, right? So sure, did he throw some interceptions? Obviously, in this system, you got to take risks, and some of them were kind of unlucky. But he also made super awesome plays to get them into that spot to win that game. And then you look at that run, every game, 30 points. You think about that 4 games, 30 points. Aaron Rodgers has never done that in his career in the playoffs.
Um,
Like,
and then you look at
that's
the
crazy.
That's
And
insane.
but like Washington, you bring up a backup quarterback, and everyone talks about the defense. Backup quarterback, they win. Aaron Rodgers in Lambeau, 2 safeties out. They kind of fell apart on defense in the second half. They win that game. Really, the defense played really well versus the Saints and really well versus the Chiefs. It
But
was a team
Brady,
effort, but
the
they don't do
super
that
the
without Brady.
Super Bowl performance from Brady, and I know the defense obviously, they dominated Mahomes. That was a big part of why they won. But it wasn't
Yeah.
like Brady was, not doing anything. Like they scored 31
No.
points. He had
He didn't have to throw for 400. I feel like he
he,
could have.
he
And
probably
if you
could have.
remember that game, I don't know how many penalty yards the Chiefs had, but they were holding on every play. Like
Yeah.
Mike Evans, I think, drew 100 yards in pass interference calls. So like he had like 200 yards and 3 touchdowns or whatever, 3 touchdowns, I think, 0 picks. But he could have had 400 if the game was close.
And then you always that is statistically one of the most efficient Super Bowl performances of all time from a quarterback. And I always go back to Brady's leadership. It resonated from everybody. Like Rob Gronkowski, right? Ndamukong Suh, Jason Pierre-Paul, they were all on the team. They are top shelf veterans. And then you have Devin White and Carlton
Yeah.
Davis and Scotty Miller who did nothing in their career before that, and they all loved him. So it's like both the young guys and the older guys, they loved him. He was
That's
a big part
something.
of he was basically, and I know Arians was the coach of the team, but he was the coach of the team on the field. Yeah, he'd gotten to that point with his mind, and I think that really showed last year in Tampa. And
That's something about
yeah.
Brady Ultra, not to interrupt you or anything like that. That's a great point about the age difference.
Right.
Because for a lot of years, Brady was so much older than everybody he played with. And that's something I noticed in New England as well as in Tampa Bay, is how well he is as a person to relate to other players. And that goes very unidentified with leaders, but that's really the most important thing. You know, a person can't believe in you. They can't be led by you. They can't believe that you're the leader unless they like you, unless they respect you and they feel like you understand them, right? And I think there's this thing with Brady where it's like he's the GOAT, he's on this pedestal and like he can't be approached, and that's not really the way he is, even though it kind of feels like it. It's like all the players from the back of the roster to the front of the roster, no matter how good or how small of a role you have, like he made you feel like you were a special part of the team, and that is the greatest part of his leadership.
Whether you were the punter or the number 1 receiver. So,
yeah.
And I even think like going from Boston to South Florida is a huge change in terms of culture and location, and it didn't have really an effect on his leadership ability. So that is the first thing I'll remember, is his first year in Tampa and his leadership. The second thing I'll remember about Brady, and this really hurt me and it really made Mitch happy, was the Julian Edelman catch.
Yes.
In the Super Bowl 51, which was really a traumatic experience. But just like you think of Brady, he won 3 Super Bowls from 2001 to 2004. And then he went on a run from 2005 to 2013 where he didn't win a Super Bowl. He got to 2.
Yeah.
And the way he lost both of them, the first one was because of a David Tyree helmet catch. And the second one was because Eli Manning decided to turn into like God himself. And Mario Manningham made one of the best catches I've ever seen in 2011. Which is giving Mitch bad.
I saw the David Tyree catch yesterday. For some reason, they played it during the damn Pro Bowl event.
Because it was the 1 year, it was like the 15-year anniversary.
And David Tyree was actually there. But yeah, so I was like, why do you play this? And every time I see it, I'm like, stop playing this clip. I hate it. But speaking about that run there, Ultra, from 05 to 13, interesting you bring that up. I actually got the stats for that. I'm so deep in the weeds on this Brady video, bro.
Yeah, he's gone straight just in the tunnel.
It's unbelievable how many stats I have on this thing, and I think I need to throw some out. But yeah, so looking at that run from '05 to 13. I feel like that was a big transition period for the Patriots as a franchise. As I'm trying to find these stats, but yeah, that was a big transition period. They kind of had to rebuild the
Identity of the
certain
team.
players and the identity of the team, and Brady really took kind of the stranglehold of like what the Patriots were. You know, it kind of went from this is Belichick's team to this is Brady's team in about '05-ish. And then it kind of became like in certain seasons they didn't really belong. Like
'2009.
'05 is one of them.
Yeah.
Where I remember a time where they were starting Heath Evans at running back.
The tight
I'm
end.
not even joking. '06 they didn't have any receivers. And then '09 their defense was completely new. They still had
The
Welker and Moss. Like they had some good players,
I
don't
still
get me
remember
wrong.
like the 2013 season. Oh, just to jump up a couple
Yeah.
years. Like I remember that was one of the few games where like, it was Patriots Broncos. I felt like the Patriots didn't belong talent wise on the same field as Denver did. And the
Yeah,
game,
part of that was not having Gronk because he
yeah,
was
that's
such a big
fair.
part.
But still, like the fact
Yeah,
that Brady beat that team in the regular season was insane to me.
yeah.
But yeah,
But yeah, I have the run right here. I've pulled the stats
yeah,
up, but it's just crazy. Like this is his worst postseason run, '05 to 2013. This is 8 seasons. So he was 9-8, which for reference, Breeze had 9 playoff wins in his entire career. Okay,
yeah.
4,473 yards, which would be tied for, or which would be 10th all time in the playoffs. Touchdowns, he had 32, which would be tied for 8th all time in the playoffs. He had 5 conference championship appearances, which would be tied with Rodgers, Roethlisberger, Favre, and Manning, Peyton Manning. 2 Super Bowl appearances, which would be the same as Favre and more than Rodgers. That was just an 8-season sample size from '05 to 13 with the stretch with his worst teams and the stretch where he had to carry their teams and the stretch where like they weren't good. Like this, and he wasn't in some of these games very good. Like the '09 Ravens game without Welker, their offense fell apart. The 2011 AFC Championship was tough, but he came through with the win. 2012 AFC
I
Championship
like
game.
just remembering that game. I don't think the Ravens probably should have won. Like, let's just be honest.
They probably should have won, and they were the better team looking back at it, like from a
Yeah.
talent perspective. But it was just like the Patriots made some big plays in that game.
The Heath Evans drop killed them.
Yeah, so they had the Heath. Was it no, not Heath
Or
Evans?
the Lee Evans drop.
Lee
Excuse me.
Evans.
Yeah.
Sterling Moore punched the ball out, so technically he didn't drop it. But yeah,
Still
and
should have
Billy
caught
Cundiff,
that.
it should have went to overtime because Billy Cundiff
Yeah.
should have made that
Right.
30 whatever field goal it was. But yeah, there was games in there, but there was also games in there where he was like amazing. Like the Broncos game in 2011, I think he had 6 touchdowns. So there were games where he was just stellar, and there were games where it was rough. And certainly in both Super Bowls, they had a great opportunity to win them. I look at '06 as a season that is probably the one that I always look at and say like
That's a positive season in my opinion.
it's a positive season, but they could have easily won the Super
They
Bowl.
sh-
Like the Bears.
I was
The Bears were an easy win. Like the AFC Championship was Super Bowl. If you
I
could
was
beat
I
the
was
Chargers and the Colts, like yeah.
I
But
was reading his book where it said there's a universe in 2006 where Tom Brady wins the Super Bowl against the Bears, and there's a universe where he loses the divisional round to the Chargers, right? And
yeah,
so it's kind of like I think the title was you win some, you lose some, right? So they got the Chargers win, weren't able to beat the Colts.
yeah,
Um, but going back to the Edelman catch, they'd won the Super Bowl in 2014, so like that whole like
mm-hmm.
hoodoo was done with. They lost in 15, mostly because injuries and the no-fly zone. But
yeah,
in 2016, they were getting handled by, like, when I talk about handled, I mean, it was one of the worst Patriot performances in big games that I remember. It was 28-3. New England had started to come back. It was 28. Then it got to 28-9, 28-12. Then it got to, I think it was 28-20 before
yeah.
the Edelman catch.
They
And
had
then
to
they get,
convert 2 2-point conversions.
yes,
I
too.
think so.
Because
Obviously,
they
the
missed the extra
Hightower
point.
play helped. That was kind of the play where it was like, now they've got a chance, because then it didn't seem too crazy that they could come back.
See, being the pessimistic Falcons fan that I am, it was like when they got the Edelman catch, right?
Yeah,
I knew New England would win the game. I knew it.
yeah.
There's no
I
way.
think everyone did.
I did. I
Because
think so.
I've been on the other side, right? I was
Right.
on the other side of Tyree and the other side of Manningham. It's like, gosh, like you're gonna lose. But the one that's why the 14 game is so crazy to me, because the
The
curse
crazy curse
catch
catch. Right.
was the same thing, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh, not again. And all my friends are like, oh, there it is again, the catch that seals the fate of the Patriots. And then Butler gets the pick, and I say, F you, F you. But
We'll get to that in a little bit.
yeah,
But
but yeah, that 16, is it the catch, or is it the moment, or the game, or like what's
I think just
exactly
like it's kind of like, all right, so God made me have to deal with Tyree. He made me have to deal with, the other one, Manningham, but he gave me the Edelman catch, right? In reality, none of them should have been catches
yeah.
in normal games.
And the
But
Falcons had the Julio catch too.
yeah, but I think the
That was
Julio
after,
catch was more like Julio is just unstoppable, like just
I
positioning
guess, but it
wise.
was an
The
amazing
Edelman catch
catch.
was like it was bobbling on the floor. There
Yeah,
were
yeah, yeah.
three
It was
Falcons that
flukier.
should have been picked off, and Edelman makes that insane catch. And just judging by Brady's reaction after the catch, I think he was like, "Thank God!" And of course, he cashed in. They won the Super Bowl. I think in that game, he became the GOAT for a lot of people. He was already the GOAT for me before that, which we'll get to. But yeah,
And
I
the thing
think
with that game too, of recent events, recent documentaries, Brady actually said that he was concussed in the fourth
yeah, I don't
quarter.
know if that's true.
I don't know if it's true, but I
If he,
remember Giselle like being very angry about that after the game, and then now that coming out on the documentary, I don't know if it's true or not, but that would make it even more impressive.
I remember she wanted him to retire after that
Yeah,
game. So
I think that was part of the reason why.
look, I think I don't know, just the amount of sacks he took early on in that game. If he was concussed, he probably would have gone out of the game with injury. So I don't know,
Maybe.
maybe that's true, but I just think the reaction and like the kind of irony of okay, I get this catch because I lost out on the other two, could have lost out easily on the other three. So yeah, the third thing, and this is gonna make Mitch very happy.
No.
The first Tom Brady game that I ever saw, like the full game, was Patriots Colts 2010. Patriots won the game. That was a very good Patriots team offensively against a Colts team that wasn't
No,
one of their
Peyton
better
Manning, right?
ones in the Manning area. Yeah, Peyton Manning.
No,
And
Manning didn't play, did he?
in 2010, I think he did. Yeah, I think so.
Oh, there was one game where he didn't play.
I don't know. They played a lot of times,
Yeah, I
but
don't remember.
Mitch, when I think of rivalries in sports, you look at Larry Bird and Magic Johnson. You look at Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, and the NBA primarily because the NBA usually it's the player rivalries that make it more special rather than the team rivalries. But when you play somebody and you're going against somebody in something for a certain amount of time, you're still going against them, but you have a certain amount of respect for them.
Yeah.
And when I hear Brady, I think Manning, and when I hear Peyton, I think Tom, right? And I think what makes that kind of rivalry so interesting is kind of the differing kind of points of how they got to where they got to. Right, so Peyton Manning was born to football royalty. He grew up in the South. He went to Tennessee. He was amazing in college. He was the first overall pick and was hailed as a generational talent. Tom Brady was born to just an average family in the grand scale of things, right? He grew up in California. He went to school in cold Michigan. He was the seventh string quarterback on the depth chart at one point, had to fight for the starting job multiple times. He got drafted in the sixth round, 199. You look at how they came into the league. Peyton came into the league with, multiple coaches during his Colts run. He played at a dome, got a lot of offensive help, not a lot of defensive help. For Brady, he got one coach, played in cold weather, not a ton of offensive help, but a lot of defensive help. You look at how their careers began. Peyton was, the better quarterback. He put up a ton of very good stats, won a lot of regular season games. But the knock on Peyton was he couldn't win in the playoffs. Whereas for Brady, his statistics were still good, but they weren't what Peyton's statistics were. But Brady would win the games, right? Brady won 3 Super Bowls in his first 4 years. Peyton didn't win a Super Bowl for a while. And there was a whole thing, Peyton can't beat Brady, right? And also there was the thing, Brady can play in cold weather. Can Peyton play in cold weather? We don't know. And I do find this kind of interesting. Brady spent 20 years in New England, and then he moves to warm weather Tampa Bay, whereas Peyton spends 12 years with the Colts, and then he goes to Denver and plays in bad weather. So it's a weird kind of shift in that. But you look at the rivalry; they played 17 times. Brady's team won 11 of the 17 games, 11-6. The Patriots from 2001 to 2004 were 6-0 against Peyton Manning. But after that, from 05 to 15, very even. Manning won 6 matchups, Brady won 5. And it is to be noted, Peyton Manning is one of the few quarterbacks to actually have a winning record in the playoffs against Tom Brady in multiple games played. It's him and his brother. He's 3-2. And you look at the Super Bowls, right? You look at Brady won his first Super Bowl. He was better than Manning was in his last Super Bowl, but he wasn't a big part of the team in terms of the defense. They mostly, won that Super Bowl. And you look at Peyton, he was completely done by his last Super Bowl, but he's still, after years of carrying mediocre defenses, his defense carried him to a ring. And, they're both pillars of NFL history. They're 2 of the greatest players I think we'll ever see. And I think that rivalry with both teams, the Patriots and the Colts were always, at the top of the AFC, and then the Patriots and the Broncos for those 4 years that he was in Denver were at the top of the AFC. I think the amount of times that those teams took Super Bowls away from each other, the Colts probably would have won Super Bowls in 03 and 04 had they gotten past New England. Maybe not 04, but certainly 03, I think. And the Patriots would have won Super Bowls in 06 and 2015 had they not lost to the Colts in Denver. So there's a ton of respect there, I think, between the rivalry, and I think both of them are 2 of the greatest players I ever saw. And I think that's always going to be something I remember about Brady is the Peyton Manning matchups, and I think the same for Peyton. You, as somebody that obviously you love Tom Brady, you did not like Peyton Manning for many years as your team consistently go up against him. Just any thoughts on that?
So with that rivalry, when I was growing up, it was always kind of like that team. The Colts were always that team that you knew that you were going to see, or like the Broncos, you knew you were going to see them down the road. Right? That matchup in the regular season was kind of like the one that would most of the time determine home field and who would get home field, and that was so important to the rivalry. It felt like every time the team was at home, they would win. And then on top of that, I feel like with the rivalry and all the stats you brought up, pretty much every time like Brady had the better team, he won, and every time Peyton had the better team, he won. So it feels like whenever, whoever had the better team won the game for the most part. There might be a couple instances where that didn't happen. But you said something like you think of Peyton when you think of Tom, you think of Tom when you think of Peyton. I don't think that's the case for me anymore. It used to be, probably until like 2013. But like after that, I just feel like Brady's legacy since then has just taken on a new life. But that was certainly a huge chapter in his career, because I do feel like that was the measuring stick for Brady in a lot of ways, was Peyton Manning. And his ability to beat him was always something that you could say in his favor. And I don't think there were many quarterback rivalries, or any, that were quite like that. I don't think Montana ever had a guy like that. I don't think Elway or Marino, they really cross paths that many times to that level. So I feel like that
It's
is
the
such a
greatest
defining
quarterback rivalry
rivalry.
ever.
It's a defining rivalry of that era. I think it speaks to a lot of what made that 2000s especially so good. And yeah, I mean, what else can I say about it? It's really epic. I feel like looking back at the 2006 AFC Championship, even though the Patriots end up losing that game, I feel like that was the best kind of duel between the two players.
Right.
And yeah,
Well, I always go back to the next year, the 2007 game in the regular season. It was a really close game.
that one, I
Both were
remember that one.
undefeated.
I've never been more pumped for a game and more invested in the game and more invested in who won the game and how happy I was winning a regular season game, because that year, like, they were both undefeated. They were both undefeated. This was like week
And I
11.
and I
Like,
think
they were
people for
10, 9 and 0.
I think
People forget that.
people forget because the Patriots went 16-0. I was looking back
Yeah.
because I'm doing a Peyton versus Montana video. The 2007 Colts were a really good, complete team that probably
were
should have
very
gotten
good.
to the AFC Championship.
Yeah, they were very good. And
And Peyton
their
had one of his
defense, I
best
think, was the
seasons.
best in the NFL that year with Bob Sanders. And
They were
yeah, they
top
went
three.
to Indy. They went to Indy and they won the game. But like, yeah, I remember the last play, Roosevelt Colvin stripped the ball from Peyton Manning. They won the game. Like, I remember that. And then you have 20. I think another one like that is for me is 2014 in the regular season, because you spent a few years there where kind of from like 2006 through 2013, Peyton won most of the games. So it was kind of like, Peyton kind of turned that rivalry. And I feel like in 2014, that's when I knew the Patriots were the best team in the NFL, is when Denver came to New England and they smacked them. Like, it was like 49-20.
It was a splattering. Yep.
It was really bad. So that was the moment where I was like, this team's different because we beat Peyton Manning. Like, that's kind of like the significance.
That's the measuring stick. So
Yeah.
for Peyton fans, it was we beat Brady, and then for
Yeah.
Brady fans, it was we beat Manning.
That's the biggest thing,
And
and the most respect and the biggest compliment I can say about it is like when they beat each other, is like, okay, we got something here about your team.
right. And look, I don't think we'll ever see, for 17 different matchups, 5 playoff matchups, that's a lot. And it could have easily been more had Manning not gone out a couple of times early.
It should have been like 7.
They should have played in 07. They should have played in 2012.
Probably 08 if Brady doesn't get hurt.
Yeah. So
at least once. So he probably would have played divisional round or something.
And even 2014 had Peyton Manning
14,
been closer to his prime.
They should have played in 14. The Broncos were the second, maybe third best team that year in the AFC. I felt like through the regular season they were the second best team. I think they were the second seed. And then Peyton kind of fell apart towards the end of the season. And
that was like the playoff game with the Colts. I think that's kind of when people started saying, yeah, I think he's done. But
yeah, that year, he would smack the Colts around. It kind of knew that was going to happen. Like, it was obvious from the jump. Just the way they beat them earlier in that year. They beat them in the playoffs the year before. Like, the Colts, they just had no chance. But with the Broncos, it would have been nice to see a rematch. The Patriots probably win pretty good. But, like, I don't know. I just would have liked to seen that again that year.
So, and I think the 2006 AFC Championship, obviously winning that first Super Bowl was important for Peyton. But the fact that it came against Tom, I think, made it all the much sweeter in the AFC title game, and especially it being a comeback.
Because when you look at it, I mean, he didn't have very many good games in the playoffs. I think he had 3 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. I have the stats now.
The first 2 games were horrendous.
They were very bad. I remember.
And the first half was a continuation of that.
Yeah, so it was really, really like hurting his legacy, because not only they won those games, and really what Colts fans to that points were saying, what was like, they were always saying like Peyton carried these teams. The only reason he's not winning is because of his defense. So those first 2 games he won because of Adam Vinatieri, and he won because of his defense. And then in the third game, it was like that second half, he kind of was like, okay, Peyton, he overcame this. He got over the demon. He got the monkey off his back. Like, he was able to come back. He won the game. So he deserves the respect for that. So, yeah, that was a huge game for him in particular.
And they also played very similarly. You look at they're the two most intelligent quarterbacks ever. I think Peyton's probably more intelligent from just being an encyclopedia of knowledge. Like he probably knew more about football in general than Brady did. But I think Brady, in terms of decision making, probably a little bit better than Peyton was. They were both extremely accurate. Neither one of them had the biggest arms. Neither one of them had an arm like Mahomes or Favre or Rodgers. But Brady's arm was better. But both were strong, more than strong enough to succeed. I think Peyton was probably a little bit more mobile than Brady was, but neither of them were Michael Vick or Lamar or someone like that. So they played similar styles, and they're kind of like the perfect example of what a pocket quarterback should be, I think. So
Yeah, I
Peyton
look
Manning,
at
Tom
those
Brady,
two, Drew Brees. I think
Drew
those
Brees.
three
Yep.
kind of set the standard for what it means to be a pocket quarterback. Maybe Dan Marino as well, but yeah, those guys.
Yeah. So number 3, Manning Brady rivalry. The fourth is just a moment, a reaction from Brady. It was the I
I
rewatched
know
Super
where
Bowl
you're going with
49
this too because
last
you
night.
told me.
Yep. So the
That
Seahawks
was
are at
my
the
reaction, by the way.
1-yard line, and Russell Wilson takes the snap. Obviously, he throws the interception to Malcolm Butler, and Brady just jumps up. He jumps up. He looks like a 12-year-old in a candy store, and Jimmy Garoppolo goes to hug him, and he completely snubs Jimmy Garoppolo of the hug, and he goes straight for Josh McDaniels. This isn't like some sort of legacy-altering moment or anything like that. I just thought it was really funny.
Yeah, that was that. You know what I love about that is that captures that moment for all of the Pats fans out there that had to sit
Right.
through Tyree and had to sit through Manningham and had to sit through
06 AFC title game.
06, like every single year. That's the thing that people don't understand. A lot of people would be like, or my friends who don't cheer for the Patriots would be like, oh, you cheer for the Patriots, you win every year. It's like, bro, we had this stretch where we were so close so many times where it was like, oh, you're lucky, you're fortunate. It's like, yeah, but like I know what it means to lose and get super close and like have this run of just continuously losing in the big moment or in a game that really mattered. Like it's different to go 7-9, 8-8, like 4 consecutive
Right.
years.
That's
Go
how I feel.
13-3 with one of the best offenses you've seen in your life, and then lose to Mario Manningham. Like that,
I've also had experiences like that.
Yeah, so that's what it really means. So that's why 2014 Tom Brady's reaction is exactly what that is, because he just saw Jermaine Kearse catch the ball off his leg, you know? So that's what that is.
I still can't get over the fact that Jimmy Garoppolo got completely robbed of a
Jimmy
hug.
G didn't deserve a hug. Josh deserves a hug. That's where
So
that's my
Jimmy
hot
didn't
take.
deserve a hug, nor did he deserve his 2 NFC championship appearances or anything
No.
like that.
No.
And the final thing, this is, I think, another Super Bowl 49. Not really a moment, just kind of the performance. I think Super Bowl 49 was the moment for me where Tom Brady surpassed Joe Montana, that ended the Peyton debate completely, and really ended the Rodgers debate looking back on it. He became the greatest of all time in Super Bowl 49 in that fourth quarter for me. You look at the Patriots were down 24-14 entering the fourth quarter. I'm going to put into perspective, guys, what the Seahawks defense was. So the Seahawks defense had played the last 2 MVPs. Aaron Rodgers won the MVP that year, and Peyton Manning won the MVP the year before on what was statistically the greatest offense of all time and what was statistically the greatest quarterback season of all time. The Seahawks defense in those 2 games allowed an average of 15 points. Manning's statistics and Rodgers' statistics in those 2 games were awful. I won't go through it. But
I have them. No, I won't go through it, though. You can continue.
They were in the middle of one of the greatest defensive runs we'll ever see from a defense. The Legion of Boom. You look at the intimidation factor they have. Wagner, Michael Bennett, Cliff Averill, Richard Sherman, Cam Chancellor, Earl Thomas. Wasn't in Seattle, but it was in a dome. The Seahawks were a fast defense. They thrived in those kind of areas where it was inside. And Tom Brady, with his mind, finished them. He finished them. They were never the same defense after that game. They still had some of the same players for the next couple of
2015, they were
years.
still pretty good. But
They were good
they
in
weren't the same. They
2015.
weren't like this all-time defense. Like in
But you know what
13
they
and
lost,
14,
Mitch? You know what Brady took away from them? That invincibility that they could not be passed on.
Yeah.
That's what he took away from them. In the zone coverage,
from everybody, bro.
Julian Edelman, Rob Gronkowski, Danny Amendola, of course.
He gave Julian Edelman credit. Oh my god.
He made so many plays late in that game. And it's just, yes, Malcolm Butler, they should have ran at the 1 yard line, okay? They should have ran at the 1 yard line. But Tom Brady got them into the position to where if they would have made the interception, they win the game. He threw 4 touchdowns in the game. Right? It was one of the best Super Bowl performances we'll ever see.
Game-winning touchdown too. That was also really important.
And
because he scored a touchdown at the end. He got a game-winning drive. Some of that is taken away by the Malcolm Butler like shenanigans that people talk about, but
it still goes down in the records.
Yeah, sort of some of the stigma around Brady as well, like from the haters, not from the fans, was that he couldn't like win the game on a touchdown. He had to get his kicker to kick the ball, and Montana was
stupid,
kind of famous. Yeah, Montana was famous for like scoring a touchdown at the end, right? So that was a really big moment for him to throw that touchdown to Edelman. Looking back at it, even though in the large scale of things, 3 Super Bowls after that, it doesn't really matter too much. But at that moment, it mattered a lot.
And you've also got to put into perspective that had the Seahawks won that game, they would have won back-to-back Super Bowls. By all accounts, I remember this. By all accounts, the talk was it's the old dynasty versus the new dynasty. The AFC, it's the NFC's answer to what the Patriots were. And had the Seahawks won that game, they would have won back-to-back Super Bowls. They would have beaten Peyton and Tom to do it, the two rulers of what the AFC had become. And they probably don't go on like this run where they just consistently lose in the playoffs. They probably, become a dynasty, by all accounts. At least it looked that way by winning back-to-back Super Bowls. But Brady ended that, and he also restarted the New England dynasty. He restarted it. And I think, for a while, I did think Montana was the greatest ever, and we'll get to if he's the second greatest ever in a couple days from now. But I think that moment, Brady just passed him. Like, for a lot of people, it was Super Bowl 51, but for me, Super Bowl 49, given the defense and given just how the Patriots had been for the last 9 years and how it just kind of felt like people forget early in the 2014 season, because it was a minute ago now, there were talks, like, even though the 2013 season, as we've addressed, is impressive, Brady still had like career lows in like numbers, like passer rating, completion percentage, that kind of stuff. And there was talks because they drafted Garoppolo. Oh, are they going to replace Brady? Like, is it over in New England for Brady? Is he, is he washed?
There were talks about that. And the funny thing is, like, Ultra is now when you look back at it and you recontextualize it and you see what Brady was able to do in Tampa Bay, I don't want to give myself credit, but like as a fan myself, I was always like, well, it's not Brady. It's the players around Brady. And every time you saw him not have great stats, it was because the players around Brady were
2013, 2019,
19, like these seasons, like, oh, now look, he goes to Tampa Bay and he has good receivers and he throws 40 touchdowns. Like, so there you go. But
so do you have any thoughts on that game, that fourth quarter, just overall?
Yeah, you're right. I think for majority of people that kind of cemented his legacy as the GOAT. For me, it definitely was like reaffirming. Like, I always kind of felt like, I don't think, here's the difference. Like, I think you could say from my perspective that I always thought he was the greatest that I've ever seen.
Since 07.
But you couldn't ever be like logically,
It's like
better.
Rodgers. It's like Rodgers.
Yeah, kind of. You could always be like, he's not actually like accomplishment wise, he's not surpassed Montana.
He's the best ever. He's not the greatest ever.
Yeah, so that's kind of the way that I looked at it. But in the fourth quarter, I think he was unbelievable. Like his precision, I think that's what Brady's all about. Some of those plays, his pocket movement was phenomenal. Escaping the rush, like Michael Bennett was just destroying the Patriots the whole game. I remember Edelman's toughness. I just remember that team, like they were so tough, so resilient, and I think that game, I'm probably gonna end up doing a video down the road about it, but that game, those were two great teams, teams, and
100%.
they like defined the era of the 2010s to me. Like that is the game that I would be like, this is the two.
That's the turning
teams,
point.
The two teams, like the teams, like if I had to say like what is the game that defined this era of football, it's this game. Like that is it.
It was the best quarterback of the era versus the best defense of the era, and the quarterback ended up winning the game. So I think just Tom Brady will always, for me, probably be the greatest ever. Like I don't ever see. I think with the problem for, and people will bring up Mahomes. The problem for Mahomes is he lost to Brady twice.
Yeah,
not once, but
Mahomes,
twice.
I honestly, bro, like off the record
I think
here,
he's
even
out of
though
the
this is on the
conversation
record. Yeah, I don't even think it. You can't even like. I don't care if you win 7 Super Bowls. It's not gonna matter. Like honest, it's not gonna matter. And you look at it like. Just the more I get into these numbers, man,
it's ridiculous.
Like it's impossible. Like if Peyton Manning and Dan Marino didn't win a fucking Super Bowl once.
Yeah. Can I ask, like people act like it's so easy to win a Super Bowl. Like Peyton Manning, Aaron Rodgers, and Drew Brees are 3 of the, like, they're insane players, and they have 4 combined.
Yeah, I know.
and
then you add the passing yards
and the touchdowns,
the passing touchdowns, like, and you combine them from the playoffs and the regular season. Guys almost got 100,000 passing.
And then there's also the fact that, by the way, he had like 20 years of winning 12 games, so you've got to also do that for 20 years.
So, and then you got to think about, is this player going to play till 40?
Probably and then you've also got to think about if he only going to get
when
injured.
He's 44.
Is he only going to get miss 1 full season, right?
Yes.
Mahomes
like Brady did, which is insane in his prime, where he might have won the Super Bowl.
Mahomes didn't play at all in 2017. He played 1 game, so that's the season. That's a year.
Brady
off.
didn't play in 2000 and 2008, right? So he played 22 years. That's what every stat says, but he
played
20
seasons.
Yeah. So.
So is there anything you want to add there? Any moments that I forgot, or I tried to limit it to 5, but those were kind of things that stood out.
I don't know why this is always comes back, It's the 2014 divisional round game.
Ravens, right?
That game is the Brady game. You gotta watch that game. I'm telling you, it's just Tom Brady, man. He threw like 50 times. They ran the ball 3 times. He's playing a team that they lost to in the playoffs.
It felt like they'd always lost to.
Always lost. They always had their number. Like at least, like maybe even when they beat them, they had their number. The game.
And the Ravens were like that team that, like, I remember people saying. Most people were pretty consensus that New England would at least get back to the Super Bowl and entering the 14 playoffs. But people were like, okay, if there's one team that can trip them up, it's the Ravens, right?
Yeah. And Joe Flacco is playing out of his mind.
Again.
And and so, and they came back from 14 twice in 1 game versus Terrell Suggs.
Against the 6th best defense in points allowed.
Yeah, Elvis Dumervil. Like, are you kidding me? So they had, that is just like a Tom Brady game and I remember Collinsworth being like, this is just a game this guy has done so many times on the sideline. Like I remember
Mosley was there.
Yeah, that is a good team. And yeah, it's just what to me Tom Brady is. It's like it didn't matter how good his defense played. It didn't matter if he threw a pick earlier in the game, or it didn't matter if he was down 14 twice. You could throw all those excuses out the window. The guy won the game. He had no running game. His defense got shredded. Like, they won. Like, that's it. So that's the moment for me.
Yeah. So, and I think the other thing with Brady, the couple more things, just as like a someone that predicts games and predicts what's going to happen in the season before the season begins. It felt like every year, I didn't pick them to win the Super Bowl every year, but it felt like every year I could say, okay, New England's going to win 12 games. They're going to go to the AFC Championship.
Yeah.
We'll see how they do after that.
From 2003 to 2021, Tom Brady, you could make an argument, could have won the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
every single season. You could be like, before the year, you could be like, oh, the Patriots, I'm going to pick them. Or you could be like, at the end, you could have been like, you know what, if that thing would have went this way, or this thing would have went that way. Maybe
there's certainly, you could very much easily argue that in 2011 they could have won the Super Bowl rather than in 2013. But yeah, there was
but
something there.
Even then, you could be like, well, if Gronk doesn't get hurt and like, then maybe they've got a shot. Like, and Welker doesn't. Whatever he did to Talib that year, he like freaking hurt him. I don't know how he did it. Bro, Talib got hurt in 2 consecutive AFC championships. I'm done with that. Never mind. But yeah, that it's just like, that's insane. Every season. You can't say that about anybody. He never had the lulls. It was so consistent. And I think the true way to measure a quarterback, or any player for that matter, is consistency across board, especially quarterback. Consistency from front to back. Every other quarterback, Peyton had the end, Peyton had the beginning, Peyton had a couple years there where it wasn't his best. Favre had like this. Rodgers even had a year at the end of McCarthy where he missed the playoffs, right? Like,
I think
had 7 and 9 years. Like all these,
I think for
like Brady was across the board.
For Montana, he didn't play as long. Long. Played in a different era. For Peyton, his first year and his last year were horrible. This may shock you, actually. I looked at this. That from 2000 to 2009, the Colts actually had a higher win percentage than New England did.
Yeah, I'm not
in the regular seasons. But the problem for Peyton and the problem for Breeze and the problem for Rodgers and all these guys, great seasons, but they only won 4 Super Bowls, and that's winning a Super Bowl. I'd be like credit for that. Brady won 7. And Favre. And meanwhile, when you compare it to these guys did one before the salary cap when they got basically the same team every year.
Yeah.
And they also didn't have near the statistics Brady did. So
the only way this is going to be possible, which I don't think is even possible in the NFL, is super teams. Like having like the same, like the Warriors of the NFL.
You
like,
can't
that's
do
the only, but you can't do that. Like that would last for a year. And then after that, like you win 1 Super Bowl maybe. And then we see in NFL, because it's 1 game elimination, you could be the best team ever and lose on a helmet catch. So that's the way it works in the NFL, right? So or
injuries,
there's not 7
too.
Game series. Injuries can happen, like the 2021 Bucks. But the thing with Brady, as well as what you're saying, is like that 1 game. Like you could have a great season. Like Peyton Manning had 9 seasons where he went to the playoffs, but he lost the first game he was in the playoffs.
1 and done.
And you work all year to get to the playoffs.
That's not even counting the years he lost the Super Bowl, lost the AFC Championship.
Yeah. So that's just so like mentally draining as well. So for Brady to be able to do that, and in seasons where he lost the Super Bowl in 2017, they came back and won the Super Bowl the year after. Like that's just insane. So I don't think it will ever be topped. I don't think anyone's ever going to surpass him. And if you want to hear more about that, I'm making a video about it. I'm probably going to make 1,500 videos about it. But yeah, stay tuned.
He's probably going to have a Brady year in, So, all right, that's the end of this video. Thanks to Mitch for joining. Go check out the Bottom Line View. I'm sure you already have already, but I'll be linking it in the description. Tom Brady is the GOAT. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and like for more content. I am getting ready for a Peyton Manning versus Joe Montana comparison. So
Ooh.
make sure to check out that in a couple days. All right, guys. Have a nice day.